In this video, I'm going to be talking about the top 5 mistakes and misconceptions that people make when they're trying to work with their nervous system to heal chronic illness. These are all mistakes that I personally have made, things that I didn't understand, that I needed to understand better and stop doing before I was able to fully and completely recover from chronic fatigue syndrome, IBS, POTS, and a host of other chronic conditions. My name is Cedar. My business is Cedar Sacred Well, and I love sharing these nervous system tools with people because they helped me go from housebound to hiking mountains again, and I want you to also feel ease and freedom in your body. So let's get into it. First mistake, thinking that the nervous system is all in your head. This is so common, and most of the other misconceptions and misunderstandings about this actually stem from this primary kind of, I don't know how this got so ingrained, but people usually think of the nervous system as what is my emotional or mental state. And this makes sense, right? Because sometimes that's the most obvious thing. If you're really activated and you know that you're activated or you're triggered, you can tell that you're in fight or flight mode or something like that, then it's usually that agitation and stress and anxiety, even fear, the racing thoughts, those are all the things that you notice the most. But there's a lot of other things happening actually when you go into that sympathetic state. Your pupils change so that you can focus more narrowly. Your inner ear changes so you can pick out certain sounds better. Your breathing changes, it becomes more shallow and in your chest. The blood rushes to the muscles in your arms and your legs so that you can fight, so that you can run. Your digestion is slowed down. Your detoxification processes are slowed down. Your immune function is slowed down or toggled off basically because, and different other immune systems, super complicated, other parts of it get ramped up. So basically there's this whole biological cascade within the body that occurs when we go into one of these survival states. And we aren't aware of most of the things that are happening in our bodies. You might be able to tell that your heart rate has sped up or that your breathing is more shallow and faster. But a lot of those other things are not things that we're able to consciously tune into. Like your blood pressure, you could test your blood pressure and see that it's raised. But if you don't have a test, you probably wouldn't know that. So that's just one example of the ways that your nervous system, while it's more obvious what's happening emotionally or mentally, is actually creating a lot of different changes and effects systemically through your whole body across many different organ systems and physical functions. And the same is absolutely true of the shutdown or collapse response. The same is true of any of the other nervous system responses. So that's the first thing that I really, really want people to understand. And I talk more about different conditions that are associated with these nervous system states when they become chronic in my Decode Your Nervous System free masterclass, which I will link down below. So that's the first one. That's a really big one. Okay, if any part of that is not making sense to you, please drop a comment down below, watch that class, send me an email. I really, really want you to understand this because it helps everything else that you do make so much more sense. Mistake number 2 is thinking that you have to be anxious, noticeably anxious, or some other kind of intense emotional and mental experience, or that you have to have had a lot of trauma in order to be dysregulated. And let me just real quick define what I mean by dysregulated versus regulated, because these are words that get tossed around a lot. This isn't on my list, but this is another common misconception, is that dysregulation is when your nervous system is kind of stuck in a threat or survival response, as opposed to regulation being where you can move in between the different survival responses as is appropriate to, going about your daily life. So back to mistake number 2, which is, this misconception that you could only be dysregulated if you have a significant trauma history or if you're anxious all the time. I really didn't understand this because I always thought, I'm calm. I'm as cool as a cucumber. Like, I'm as calm as anybody could be. And there's no way that I'm in a dysregulated state because I'm like not anxious. I'm not stressed. Like, I have lots of good stress protocols. So I really didn't understand this because I thought that my baseline normal, which to me felt like calm and, unstressed, unbothered, was regulation, or was that rest parasympathetic state. That was not actually true. It took me a long time to realize this. My baseline normal state was a slight activation, was essentially a chronic dysregulation state. And I didn't get that through any kind of major trauma. My nervous system never fully learned how to self-regulate, either, through childhood or through our culture or whatever, however it may be. I didn't have a baseline of safety, rest and digest, safe and social, parasympathetic nervous system. And it wasn't until I started to do this work fairly intensively and practice somatics multiple times a day for weeks and months that I started to experience something that was very different from my normal calm, or so I thought, state, which was a deep inner peace and optimism. So I was always like a very optimistic, happy person. But underneath that was just a little bit of urgency, a little bit of frustration, a little bit of a short fuse sometimes, kind of a diminished capacity for, inconveniences, and those little annoyances day to day would just kind of set me off and rile me up. Whereas now I don't even notice them. I don't get frustrated with traffic. If something in the kitchen breaks, I'm like, oh, that's fine. Just little things like that. So that's just one example of how things have shifted so dramatically for me. People that really, really used to bother me now just maybe I don't want to be around them, but they just don't really bother me anymore. They don't get to me because instead of having kind of this little cup or little bucket of peace and safety, I have a whole lake or a whole ocean of peace and safety inside of me. So that's just kind of one way to think about this, to think about regulation versus dysregulation. And I have a lot of clients who come to me and say, I don't know if nervous system work is the thing because I feel calm, I'm not stressed, I'm not anxious, And what often we end up discovering together is that they're actually just a little bit disconnected from their emotions, a little bit disconnected from their bodies. That was the case for me. Again, I would never have admitted that before I started doing this work and understood what it could actually look like, what I could actually feel like day to day. So I guess, the misconception is just that this doesn't apply to me because I don't have trauma, or I'm not anxious, or I feel calm. And to that, I would say there's really no downside to working with the nervous system and learning some somatic tools, other than, I guess the time commitment, but you can only benefit from it, and you might discover that actually you were living in a dysregulated state and didn't realize it just because it felt normal to you. It's maybe that's kind of been your whole life or most of your life, and you just assume that's how everyone feels, when in fact it could be so much better. So I'm just telling you, maybe it could be so much better. And that's what I love to offer people through the work that I do. Number 3, the third misconception I want to share is thinking that regulation means you're always calm and you're always peaceful. And that is not the case. I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but that regulation actually means that we can move in between different nervous system states in response to the world as we interface with it. That's why they're there. We need all of these nervous system states. None of them is bad. None of them is wrong or unhealthy. The only thing that is unhealthy is when we get stuck in survival responses and we can't fluidly move back into a safety state. So yeah, thinking that, I have to just be calm and peaceful all the time. I have to be happy all the time. If I get angry, I must be dysregulated. If something annoys me, I must be dysregulated. All those different things, when in fact, maybe your nervous system is responding to something real. Like maybe something a little bit scary happened or a little bit threatening happened, and your nervous system is helping you to navigate that. Or maybe there's an emotion coming up. Sometimes people use this to avoid their feelings. Guilty. Again, I have made this mistake as well, of like, oh, I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling sadness, and this feels uncomfortable. I must need to do a meditation or somatics or something to regulate myself. Maybe that would be helpful, and maybe you need to feel your feelings. So I just want to encourage you, if you've been, especially if you've been doing nervous system work and you've been taking this approach of like, I just have to, have to always be peaceful, I have to always be calm, I can't ever get activated. Like that can become its own kind of vigilance and its own threat trigger, honestly. So just making space for the full range of human experiences while also supporting yourself through different somatic tools, other regulation tools, but knowing that even if you're regulated, it doesn't mean you're never going to get upset or you're never going to, have to deal with discomfort or triggers or things like that. It just becomes much less and much, 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 much easier. The fourth mistake or misconception is that sometimes people will come to nervous system work and nervous system tools and expect them to work like a pill or a procedure or something you would get from the doctor. I mean, that makes sense, right? Especially if you're approaching this as someone with a chronic illness and you've been told like, hey, this really helped me heal, then it might make sense that you're thinking, great, like I'm going to do this thing and it's going to work and I'm going to feel better. And then when that doesn't immediately happen, it can be really discouraging and it can feel like, why did I bother? Like this isn't like one more thing that's not going to work for me, right? Because most of us have tried a lot of different things and it gets exhausting and it gets frustrating. I have been there and I completely understand. So that's why it's so important to understand this, that when you're doing nervous system work, when you're doing somatics, this is not, it's not like a pill, it's not like a procedure, it's not something that you take or you do and it creates an instant change. What it does do is it shows your nervous system that there are other possibilities. It kind of just like opens up some space to maybe we're not in danger. And at first, your nervous system's not going to believe it. It's going to be like, hey, I'm pretty sure that we are in danger because I have been ringing the alarm for possibly years, possibly forever. I've never experienced something that's been safe, maybe at all. So, no, that's ridiculous. I'm going to keep ringing this alarm. I'm going to stay in this survival state because so far it's worked and we've survived. So let's keep on going. And that patterning is so strong. It's so strong because it is connected to our survival, right? It just wants you to survive. And let's really honor that and really remember that all of these things have a really good purpose and a really good reason. But when we start to work with the nervous system, what we do is we teach it that actually maybe we're not in danger, maybe there's some safety, maybe there's another way of being and another way of approaching the world. And as you start to do this, you might not notice anything at first. You might notice just tiny, tiny little changes like, oh, I felt like I almost wanted to yawn, or I'm a little more aware of my legs and my feet now than I was before. Just little tiny things like that. And those are signs that your nervous system is just barely starting to shift more into a state of safety and is starting to release just a little bit of stress and pressure. And that's fantastic. So people often don't know to look for those little signs. So I'm telling you right now, I have a whole list of other ones in my free Decode Your Nervous System class, which I'll link down below here. There are a lot of signs that your bodies could tell you that it's releasing some stress, starting to get the message. That's what you want to go towards. Not expecting this to be a big fix or a one and done thing, but just slowly making that shift. And a great metaphor that people often use for neuroplasticity is like if you're going through a very brushy, dense forest, there's a big wide path over here, and then there's just brush and trees and bushes over here. But you don't want to go over there anymore because you know that that leads towards symptoms and illness and chronic inflammation. You want to go over there. But they're starting from the same place. And so every time you go on that direction, you're pushing your way through the brush and there's like almost no trail to follow. But as you keep going and going and going and going, it becomes a more defined path. At the same time, this path slowly gets overgrown and becomes less likely to be the default system. So that's kind of more of a brain retraining metaphor, but I think it's also helpful to think of here and just kind of this slow, repetitive process that we have to embark on if we really want to see change. So that's the fourth common misconception. And the fifth one is that people often come to this and use just a brain retraining approach. And I'm not knocking brain retraining. I'm probably going to do a whole nother series on some issues and some tips around that. But there are a lot of great programs out there that use primarily brain retraining, neuroplasticity work, and or meditation. And those are great tools. Those are fantastic tools. And if you enjoy those, then absolutely continue with them. The only thing that I see a lot that can sometimes hold people back or trip people up is not realizing that that's not the only way to work with the nervous system. There are actually 4 pillars of safety, which I talk about again in my Decode Your Nervous System class, so please do check that out. I'll link it. But that there are other ways of signaling safety. There are other ways of engaging with the nervous system that are a little bit less like mind and mental focused and that are based on the body. So that's where somatics comes in. That's my specialty. It's what I'm certified in. I also teach brain retraining. I have a long history of teaching meditation and visualization as well. But the somatic tools were what totally changed the game for me, because you can trick yourself in your mind, right? And if you have a big disconnect between your mind and your body, then you're maybe not getting the message actually where it needs to be, which is in the body, in the subconscious. So that's what somatic tools do, is they work on the level of the body and the subconscious by using different like movements, strategies, things that are innate to the body in the rest and safety state as triggers to move into that safety state. I'm going to give you a couple examples. I have a bunch more that I'm going to teach in the next video, so definitely tune into that. But one example is your vision. So I think I mentioned at the beginning of this video how your vision narrows, your pupils literally change, and your vision narrows when you're in a threat state. So if you want to just try this with me, put your arms out to the side and wiggle your fingers and move them in until you can just barely see the wiggling fingers while keeping your head forward, but you can see the fingers out of the corners of your eye. And it might be helpful if you look kind of up over your computer for a moment, just out into space, like not really focused on anything, but able to take in both sides of your vision, this peripheral vision where your fingers are, while looking forward. And then you can try dropping your hands down and see if you can keep that focus. So see if you can be aware of just a couple of things that are off to your right and a couple of things that are off to your left, without actually looking to the side, but just keeping your gaze forward, keeping your head forward. Just notice what's to both sides of you. I actually just got a spontaneous deep breath from doing this. So this is something that your body will naturally do when it's in a rest or safety state that can be very difficult when you're in a sympathetic or an activated state. And so we can use that kind of innate natural cue to show the body like, oh, look, I don't need to have a narrow focus. Actually, I'm safe enough to have this kind of softer, wide vision. Another place that you can intervene is with the breath. So as I mentioned before, the breath gets shallow, it gets fast, it's high up in the chest. If you slow your breath, if you let it drop all the way down to the belly, let your belly be soft so that you can get a nice deep belly breath. Those are all ways to send signals to your body through the body instead of through the brain and through the mind. So I'm going to leave you with that and promise that I will be back in the next video, and I'm going to teach you my 5 favorite somatic tools that I love to use for nervous system regulation. So be sure to come back for the next video, and I will put the link to my free class in the comments below. Feel free to drop a question or a comment about this video. I'd love to hear from you.